Hello and welcome to the Be Glad movement. My name's Pollyanna and I'm on a mission to bring you as many stories as possible of good coming out of bad and reasons to be glad. And today I'm joined by Bex. Say hello, Bex.
Hi.
Thank you so
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. As I was just sort of saying to you before we hit record, I'm really glad that you're coming on because you've got sort of lots of different smaller scenarios where you've sort of essentially used the GLAD game. And I was also telling you that I was talking to a friend who felt like they couldn't share because they didn't have some big catastrophe that suddenly turned out okay. But actually what the Be Glad movement is about is using the GLAD game and acknowledging the negatives, but then searching for the positives within and focusing on positives, gratitude and things that we're actually really lucky to have in our life. So without me waffling on for too much more, I'm going to get out of the way and let you tell your story. So fire away.
Well, where do I start, really? As you said, as we were talking about earlier, I think it's really important to I don't even know what I'm going to say now. Sorry, Polly.
That's all right. That's okay.
So as we were talking about earlier, I think it's really important to discuss positive mental health and finding ways to be happy, because I think if you're struggling with your mental health and you're going through periods of anxiety or depression, when you're able to look at other people and see them overcome the most awful challenges or obstacles and they still come out of it with a positive mindset, it kind of makes you feel worse, and it makes you feel like, oh, if they can manage it over that challenge and I can't even cope with the small things, it puts you back into that mindset of I'm not good enough, I'm never going to get over this, and what is wrong with me. So I think it's, like you said, it's really important to be able to have smaller choices. I think mental health and positive mental health is very much about making everyday choices. I don't think it's something that you can do in a massive, right, I'm going to overcome this huge challenge. I think it is about small everyday choices with whichever challenge comes up. If it's something tiny like the kids are arguing, or something big like a health concern or something like that, I think it's important to try and choose to be happy as much as.
Yeah, definitely. And I like what you said there about making the small choices, because it's like when you go to the gym, you don't expect to go to the gym once and come out looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You have to go regularly and you start small and you build it up. So by being positive on a regular basis about the smaller things, you can sort of build that mental resilience, can't you? And I know you said to me that when you and your husband first got together, you were a bit all over the place, and that kind of
thing. I think when I was younger, I was very much both my parents had depression as I grew up, so I think I was quite an emotional child and a very emotional teenager, and I did struggle with anxiety and depression. And I do very much recognise there's a difference between depression as an illness and going through difficult periods in your life. Because I think when you've been there and you have that kind of sense of overwhelm and the feeling of worthlessness that you have with depression, I think it's important to make that distinction that it can become an illness and a chemical imbalance in the brain that needs treatment and it needs therapy. So as we were saying earlier about making small choices, if you are struggling with depression, I also think that you need to get help. It isn't a case of you can just flick a switch and be happy. So I think as a teenager, I did struggle with depression, and which sounds ridiculous now when you look at it and you think, I was 19 and I was skinny and I had lots of great stuff going for me, but I was depressed. I felt worthless. I felt like I was never good enough. I didn't know what I was doing with my life or where I was going. And I think those things are still very real for people, teenagers as well today. And then, I met my husband, and he's a very positive mindset kind of person. He's one of those people that just thinks everything's going to go his way, and it kind of always does.
Right.
So I think it kind of, you know, meeting him and falling in love with him kind of helped in lots of ways, because he would pick me up on my negative mindset when I was like, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm never going to manage with this. He'd be like, well, why can't you manage? What is it you're not good enough with? And he'd kind of pick out the practical points and make me question myself and question my own negative thinking, if that makes
sense.
And then, because of the nature of his job, obviously, you know, he's in the same boat, but he was working away a lot, and I had sort of some personal stuff going on, and I wouldn't say I had kind of a breakdown, but I was really struggling at university. It just wasn't working out for me. I was struggling with depression and self-worth and all of those things. And sorry, my cat's in the background. Can you see him?
Doesn't matter.
And we met, and we were kind of, you know, very much in love, and it was a hard relationship. But we decided, or I think I decided quite on a whim, that what I was doing, being at university and striving towards something I wasn't really sure about, wasn't working for me. It wasn't working for my mental health. It wasn't working on a personal, emotional or physical level. I wasn't even achieving the grades that I wanted to achieve. And that pressure felt too much. So I went away to stay with him in Plymouth, and we had like this lovely weekend. I was in London at the time at uni, and I said, in a nice part of London, great social life, lots of friends, you know, all the stuff that should make you happy, but it really wasn't. And we went on holiday to Devon, and I found contentment in that one weekend. I felt really happy. I had no makeup on all weekend, and we went for long walks, and we saw the moors and the beach, and we had the most amazing time. And I realized that I needed that break. I needed to stop trying for uni, because that wasn't working for me, and I needed that break from that pressure. So we very quickly was like, should we just move in together, and I'll just move in with you, and we'll see how things go. And as I said to you before, it was the weirdest thing, because before I was with him, I wouldn't even go shopping in town by myself. You know, I didn't like being on my own. I just used to get really anxious if I was on my own. So I'd always go shopping with my mum or my sisters, or, you know, I didn't particularly like my own company. So yeah, we moved in together within sort of 3 weeks. I'd left uni and moved in with him, and we moved in on the Friday, and then he went away on the Monday. And I sort of had to kind of face up to this fear. I was in a brand new city. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have a job. I'd just left uni. We had very little money, and the guy I'd moved in with was away. But actually, it was the best thing I ever did with my life, because it really gave me that chance to get to know myself and kind of address that feeling of like, well, why don't I like being by myself? What is it about my own company I don't like? And actually face up to that fear and the anxiety, and address it from that point. And like you say, making choices of like, right, I can sit in the house or sit in my flat, because we had a tiny flat and we didn't have a TV license, and we didn't even have a bed. We had like a lilo on the floor. You know, we had no, but it was fun. And I think it was the first point where I started to see that it's about the choice you make. You know, I could have seen it as, oh my God, I'm in this place where I know nobody. Or I could see it as a huge adventure. You know, I'd moved in with the man I'd fallen in love with, and I was in this new place, and it was a new beginning. So I think that was the first point I really made a choice to be happy. And it was hard. I still felt homesick, immensely homesick. I missed my family. I missed my friends. But I didn't miss uni, and I didn't miss London, and I didn't miss the pressure that I had on myself. and I got a really lovely job working as a teaching assistant in a school, which again was incredibly challenging, working with children with autism and ADHD, and the challenging children. But again, it was the first time I found I was doing something worthwhile, and I was like, I love this. I love helping people. And again, a lot of sort of helping them is about them making choices about their behaviour.
Right.
And I think by kind of helping them, it made me realise that actually I could make good choices about my behaviour and my state of mind too.
Right.
So yeah, that was kind of the first point where I think I started to choose to be happy, rather than just kind of assume it's something that you're supposed to have. It's something that I think you actively have to try for.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I like what you said when we first sort of tried to arrange doing this call, about what was the word you used? Reframing. And you said earlier about you could either sit at home and be scared in the new city, or you could see it as a big adventure. That's what you mean, isn't it, when you say reframing?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly that. Very much so. I mean, it's not a case of, that was, God, when did we move in together? Been together about 15 years. So that was a long time ago that we sort of started making those choices. And it's not a case that then, from that point on, I've always been happy and in a positive mindset. There's still continual struggles and challenges. I mean, we couldn't stay in that flat. We couldn't afford to. And I couldn't stay in that job that I was really loving. Situations change around you, but I think it's still important to try and find the positives in those situations. And I did, as I said, I felt immensely homesick. As much as I love the challenge of being in a new city, I did feel immensely homesick. I miss my family so much. So we moved home for a year and spent some time back here saving for our wedding. And but again, it's kind of realising there's pluses and minuses to situations. So being in Plymouth with him, I had a support network of sort of friends and people that were in the same situation as me, but I didn't have my family. And I also got we had the most amazing weekends together when he was home. And so I think the other thing that was kind of quite a turning point for me is realising that the situations aren't always going to be perfect. It doesn't have to always be 100% happily ever after. There are always going to be difficulties, and there are always going to be things that you have to kind of sacrifice or go without or compromise on. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to compromise your happiness, if that makes sense.
No, totally. There's a book by a lady called Byron Katie, Loving What Is, and it's sort of about, I think we're socially with social media, and there's sort of stereotypes, and this is the way things should be. Well, life isn't always so cut and dry that you fall into the fairy tale unraveling of your life, and you have to sort of say, okay, well, maybe it's not romantic that I don't get to see my husband whenever I want to, but I can love the bits that I do get with him, that kind of stuff. It's just, accepting the way things are for you and making the best of those scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely that. I think it's very much about making those choices and choosing to see the positives rather than the negatives. I mean, we did, there's been periods in our relationship where we have gone through phases where I'm like, oh my God, this is so hard. This is literally like the hardest it's ever been to be away from him. And it's, I'm lonely, I'm sad, I'm missing my family, I'm isolated. You could see all of those negatives. And we did go through periods, but I sort of, as I've grown up, I've realised that actually when we go through those negative periods, things get worse because you're seeing the negative, and it's almost like you kind of magnify that to you. So I think it's kind of an important part to try and see every day, literally every morning, what is good about today. Is it it can be a shit day because you've had a shit night's sleep, and can I swear? You can wake up and be like, oh, it's really shit that I didn't sleep well and I didn't do this or I didn't do that. Or you can wake up and be like, oh, sun's shining today, or I've got this happening today that's going to be positive. Or even if it's something really small, like I'm going to have a really nice cup of tea before I start the day, and I've got 10 minutes to kind of savor that. I think it's very important to just make those small choices. And as I said, we kind of, our relationship's never been easy because of the circumstances that we were in. But I just always used to tell myself that it was worth it. It's not easy, but it's worth it. And it always was worth it. And actually, that was one thing I was going to try. I'm kind of, you might have to edit this a lot because I go backwards and forwards between different things. But one of the things I wanted to show you was this was, I don't know if you can see it, it's a notebook that I was, when I was 9. So this was like way before memes and like law of attraction or positive mindset was kind of a thing that people talked about. And I was 9 and I was given this notebook by my nana for Christmas. And I've written all of these quotes in it about positivity. So I've put like, keep your face to the sunshine and you cannot see the shadows. Attitudes are contagious, are yours worth catching? Like all of those kind of positive mindset things. And actually this little book has kind of come around with me, and it always seems to appear at a time when I need a little bit of lifting up as well. And I'm like, oh, I find these little quotes and I think, oh, that's what I needed to hear today. So yeah, I think even as a kid, I was kind of very much about like, you need to make a choice to be happy. I think because my parents weren't happy for a lot of my childhood, so I think that kind of used to play on my mind as to why they weren't and what I could do to help them, if that makes sense. So I guess that's probably why I started the little notebook of happiness.
I love it. That's so cool.
But yeah, as I was saying, I think I just waffle and you can take out the bits that don't make sense.
No, I am actually really enjoying it. I like people to be real, so I might not edit any of these bits out. But what I was gonna say is, I know that you went through a bit of a rough time when did your husband have a heart attack? Had a heart condition or something?
Yeah, he did. We had kind of a rough few years when we had Matthew, our son. So I was in Afghan, so he had sort of the whole 6-month deployment thing. He had to save his R&R to come home in time for when Matthew was born or when he was due. So we had kind of this really horrible tour. And yeah, it was a really difficult period, being pregnant and hormonal and emotional about him being away. And I remember you've interviewed Mark Ormrod. I remember vividly, I was like 4 months pregnant and I was tucking into a bag of Pringles, actually, sitting there watching X Factor. And Mark and Becky were appearing on X Factor. And it was the first time, and I'm so naive now, but I think, times were a little bit different then. But it was the first time that I actually thought to myself, oh my God, he might not come back from this okay. Like he might come back different or injured and I remember crying my heart out. I was so frantic with worry at that point, because it suddenly occurred to me that this was real and that there could be something life-changing from that tour. And yeah, it was horrible tour. There were lots of difficult periods in those 6 months, but he did come home fine. And you know, he came home. He was home like 10 days before Matthew was born, and you know, he was there at the birth, and it was great. I'm sure he won't mind me saying, but we struggled then afterwards. You know, for him to come from somewhere like a tour of Afghanistan in a highly operational environment, to come back and have 10 days and then suddenly he's a father and a husband again. It was a really intense, the first year of Matthew's life was quite an intense period of renegotiating our relationship and kind of finding us again, and again finding the positives. You know, finding that understanding for each other, I think, was very important. We've always been quite good at talking to one another, but also finding the positives. You know, that he was home. He'd changed drafts so that he was home for quite a decent amount of time for Matthew, which was great. And so we saw the positives in that. And then so we had all this readjustment period, and where I'm going at was that I spent kind of those 6 months wondering if I was ever going to have my husband there to raise our children. You know, being pregnant, that's one of the things that was on my mind every single day. Will he know his children? Will he be here to see them? And then we slipped into normality, and we found our way to be together, and we had our second child. So it's like 2 years between Matthew and Faye, and then very shortly after we had Faye, Al collapsed in a classroom, and no explanation. I didn't know what had happened, but I remember vividly. I will try not to cry because I've told this story lots of times, so I will try not to cry. But I remember vividly, Faye was only 3 months old, and we could only 4-bunk car, so Al had taken the car with him, and I'd gone to pick Matthew up from nursery, and I was carrying Faye in, the baby carrier.
Yeah.
And Matthew wasn't in a very happy mood when I picked him up that day, and he didn't want to walk. And we'd lived in a really hilly place. We lived in Plymouth, so there were lots of hills, and it was all uphill coming back from the nursery. So I was trying to push him in a pushchair. He didn't want to go in his pushchair. He didn't want to walk, and I was trying to carry the baby, and it sort of took me half an hour to get this 10-minute walk home, you know, with a toddler and a baby. And I was dripping with sweat and furious that Al had taken the car. I was so angry. I was like, oh, he doesn't need the car. I've got 2 kids. They could have got the train. And I was so angry. And then he phoned me, and I could hear instantly from his voice that something was wrong. You get quite attuned to each other on the phone, and explained that he collapsed in a classroom, and he was at a hospital, and they were doing tests. And I remember, they didn't know what was wrong with him, but he mentioned on the phone that they wanted to test him for epilepsy. And I thought, oh God, this is real, and this is serious. And I remember kind of coming in, and I dealt with the children and gave them both a snack, and I sat on the stairs and I cried, and I felt so guilty for the anger that I just had, you know, over something stupid about them taking the car, and all of those fears. And I thought all of that worry of like what happens health wise kind of came back. And that period of not knowing what was wrong with him stretched over a period of kind of around 6 months. That was in the January. And then he sort of had like a week sick leave. But they didn't know what was wrong with me. So in some ways at that point they were like, has he just fainted? In other ways, because he kind of apparently he was convulsing, so they thought that it was some kind of epilepsy. But anyway, we had a long period of going to different doctors, and he was quite poorly and very stressed during that period. And before he'd collapsed, he'd had chest pain, which we didn't really think much of at the time. and then in the July, because he had chest pain, and it was done so flippantly, he'd gone to see somebody and had what did the brain scan things, to check for epilepsy. He'd had one of those done, and the doctor said, you haven't got epilepsy, everything's fine, you probably just fainted. However, because you had chest pain, I just want you to check in with a friend of mine who's a cardiologist to make sure there's nothing wrong on that front. And it was done so casually that we were like, yeah, fine. Neither of us kind of considered that there was actually anything else wrong.
Right.
And then he had a couple of different tests done. And then he had to have what they call an angiogram, where they put like dye into your arteries to check for things, check for block. But because we'd been running late, we sort of were rushing and everything. When he'd gone in to have this, he had quite a high heart rate. So they said they had to give him just a small dose of beta blockers to slow his heart rate down, just so they could get a clear picture of what was going on.
Yeah.
All perfectly normal. And it was 3 days before our wedding anniversary. So my father-in-law had come down to stay with the children so I could go to this appointment with him. And then we were going to do this hospital appointment and then go out for a nice lunch. And it was a lovely day. So I was there in like a skimpy pair of shorts and my favourite top, ready for my lunch date. Didn't think anything was going to happen. It was kind of our wedding anniversary night out type thing. And he came out, he'd gone in for his scan, and he came out of the doctor's appointment and said, I've just got to sit down with you for a minute till they take out the thing in his hand, the catheter, whatever it's called. So he sat with me, and then I remember his whole face went ashen. Right. And he said, babe, I don't feel very well. I was like, what's the matter? Do you need to lie down? He went, I don't know, I just feel really odd. I was like, hold on, I'll get a nurse. So I spoke to a nurse. I said, my husband's just had a scan, angiogram, he's not feeling well. And she looked at him, and we were in a cardiology department, they were older people there. We were the youngest there by a mile. And so she sort of looked at this fit young man. Yes, he was ashen, but obviously didn't think there was anything really wrong, and said, oh, can he walk? Come with me. We'll go and get you a bed. He stood up and took about 3 steps, and then he just collapsed on the floor. The nurse took his pulse, and the next thing I know, there was another nurse. They lifted his legs because I think they thought he'd fainted. The nurse took his pulse, and then the other nurse said something about him, there being no pulse, and he instantly started CPR. And then there was an alarm sounded, and they were calling for the defibrillator machines to come in. And I remember standing there, and you haven't met my husband. He's quite a big guy. He's a big, healthy guy, and he was just laying on the floor, completely white, and this nurse was performing CPR on him, and it was something that you see in movies. It wasn't something that you kind of ever expect to see in reality. And they pulled a screen across him, and as I said to you, he's the cardiologist who'd been treating him. Again, the cardiologist, very casually, when we first went to see him, was quite dismissive. No one thought there was anything wrong with his heart. We had no idea. But as I said to you when we were chatting, he was a fantastic cardiologist, and he was right outside this doctor's door. So then he was brought back round. He didn't need the defibrillator. They managed to bring him back round with CPR, and they got his pulse going, and everything was fine. And so yeah, and then he was admitted into hospital for obviously more tests. unfortunately, it didn't end there. I had no idea how complicated and difficult to pin down heart conditions were. So we had like probably a year, maybe 18 months of further testing and different things. And as I said to you, he was referred to a military cardiologist who again is like top in his field. But I think because of where it happened, and because of how it happened, Dr. Morgan Hughes, who was the cardiologist that performed CPR and brought him back round then, I think he sort of felt a responsibility to kind of find what was wrong and kind of give him the best treatment and the best life going forward as well. You know, he's only even 30 at this point. You know, this was years ago now, and so I think Dr. Morgan Hughes kind of took responsibility of Al's care quite a lot. And as I say, I can't ever say I'm glad that happened. There's no way.
Yeah.
Awful to live through. But the circumstances, you know, if you're going to go into cardiac arrest, he was outside his doctor's door, literally, you know, a cardiologist's door. He's been in some high level dangerous situations in his life that had happened in those scenarios. With, you know, and or if you know, whenever we hear stories of like people that have gone for a run and their heart's given out, you know, those things where they're on their own. So I think it's made me eternally grateful that I still have him, obviously, and that he's here, and also the kind of the way it panned out. I feel as though, well, you know, my business is quite a spiritual business. I'm quite a spiritual person, but I feel very much that he was being looked after in that scenario. Feel like it was, if it was going to happen, there couldn't have been a better place for it to have happened. So I very much feel like he was kind of being taken care of by a higher power in some way. Unfortunately, it did, you know, a few years later, it did kind of mean the end of his career. It took a couple of years before we got to that point, but he couldn't continue in the military, so he did have to change his career path. And I think for both of us, you know, it's changed our life path in lots of ways. In as I said to you about how we kind of choose to see the positives in a situation and choose to see the fact that, you know, we are still here, we're still together, we still have, you know, 2 healthy children, and just kind of trying to, and it is not easy. Picking up the pieces from that scenario is never going to be an easy thing to do, but that's kind of what we've done by trying to find the positives in it, rather than be, like I said to you, you know, be like, oh my God, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. Why has this happened to me? Why is this awful thing going on? Rather than kind of dwelling on that, because you do have those questions and you do feel that there is an element of anger and resentment. I very much felt that actually when it first happened. I did feel angry because I felt that I'd had enough of worrying about him, that, you know, he'd been to these dangerous situations and I'd spent my pregnancy worrying about him. I didn't want to have a toddler and a baby and worry about him. I wanted him to be healthy and home, and, you know, I did feel angry. But I think it's important to recognise those feelings, what they are, and try and see the positives in them and try and find the positives in them. You know, you can't stay angry, because that just makes you bitter and not a nice person. So I think it's about feeling through the emotions, if that makes sense, and recognizing, allowing yourself to feel them, and understanding that, you know, that's perfectly normal to feel that way. Then you can move on from that, and then you get to a place where you feel gratitude for having overcome situations and living through them, really. That makes
it does. It does. It makes a lot of sense. Totally.
Yeah, I think it's kind of been, for me, I'd already, actually, I didn't mention that, but when Matthew was born, one of the tricky things we had was that he was born with a heart condition. So it was, again, a very hard, when I said to you about him coming back from Afghan and then becoming a father, and Matthew was quite poorly for the first few months of his life. So again, we were struggling with it, but trying to find the positives in it. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't, it was about choosing to see the positive side of things rather than being angry about it all the time. And choosing to kind of work together rather than be kind of pulling in opposite directions, which was really tricky a lot of the time.
Yeah, I can imagine. And, you know, I've heard it, this same story said by a few people, from the guys and the girls, you know, coming back from war zone essentially to then suddenly being expected to settle into married life, being a father or a mother, and those kind of things. It's really hard to adjust, you know, really hard to adjust. So yeah, can't be underestimated.
No, and I think those things in your relationship, I think they do make you stronger, and I think that they it's not easy being married to somebody that does that for a living and does that as a job, and I don't think I know anyone who would say that they openly liked it and loved that as part of their lifestyle. You kind of fall in love with the person, and the lifestyle is kind of what you have to put up with to be with that person, if that makes sense. But I think that does make you stronger, and it does make you recognize the good in each other and try harder. I think a lot of I don't know whether that's fair to say, I've never been in a 15-year civilian relationship, but I think we're always trying in our relationship. We don't want to take each other for granted. We don't want to let it go. We don't want to have just gone through everything we've gone through together and then throw it away because it's too much hard work, you know. So I think that's true for a lot of military relationships, that you learn that it's worth the effort. Wise. So that's kind of those are the difficult stuff that we've lived through. I think those are the kind of situations where it's been really hard to see the positives, and it's really been a hard choice to choose to be happy, and I, you know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm a saint and I didn't get angry, and I didn't have days or weeks even of feeling resentful and bitter and sad about the scenarios, but you just don't stay in that bitterness and in that sadness. You have to try and find a way to pull yourself out of it, and try and, like you say, play the glad game, write gratitude lists, right? Even if it is just really small things that you could be grateful for in the day. I think that helps to twist your mindset into being positive, and seeing the best of a situation, whether that situation is a good situation or a bad situation. There's always a way to make the best of it. Does that make sense?
Totally, totally. I think that sums it all up perfectly. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I think it's, as I said to you, it's I've been quite lucky. I'm quite a spiritual person. I think after Matthew was born, because we struggled with his with kind of becoming a family, we struggled with that quite a lot. And I kind of was personally within a job that I was feeling unfulfilled in before I had my son.
Yeah.
So I'd started kind of doing more spiritual things, like Reiki healing was something that kind of came in my path, and then I explored that. So I think having that kind of spiritual background helped me with a lot of the challenges after. You know, when I was poorly, I think I was still working in a sort of doing alternative therapies, and I could draw on that to help him. So, you know, he was so stressed with the not knowing, you know, if you've ever had a kind of situation where you've been told that there might be something wrong with you, but we're not quite sure what. Off you go home and we'll try and figure it out. It's, you know, that level of stress, that low level of stress for 12 months to 18 months, you know, it did take a toll on us. But I think I was able to draw on the complementary therapies. We did Reiki and we did reflexology, or I did that for him to help him kind of unwind, help him to kind of release some of that stress that was going on with that. And as a family we do it as well. The kids are quite kind of open to alternative therapies now. They're like, I need a crystal to help me sleep, Mum, can I have one?
Oh, that's lovely. Tell us a bit more about your business then, hon. Tell us about the Reiki and the...
Yeah, it started with Reiki, as I said, after Matthew was born. He was born with a congenital heart defect. So he had a hole in his heart. So it seems that all the men in my life have broken hearts, but I don't connected. But yeah, he was born with a heart defect. So the first few months of his life, he was really quite poorly, and he wasn't kind of putting on weight, and they were discussing different options. Before I had him, I'd done a Reiki healing session, a couple of healing sessions on myself. I'd had them done, and the lady who did them offered to teach me level 1 Reiki, so I could give Reiki to people in like family and friends. And I did it. I fell in love with Reiki, and I thought it would be a really nice thing to try. And then when Matthew was born and he was poorly, I did Reiki on him every day, every single day. He'd go to bed, and I was very like, I didn't want to be, because you know, your first one, you have to do everything right. I didn't want to be one of the mums that would hold his hand going to sleep. So he used to go in his cot, and then he used to settle himself. We had a muzzy and a dummy and things. So then I'd sneak back in after he'd gone to sleep, and I'd spend sort of 15 or 20 minutes giving him a little bit of Reiki every day, either when he had a nap or at bedtime, or sometimes both. And when he was, I think he was about 10 months old, with the condition he had to, because he had a hole in his heart, basically as he grew, that hole should close by itself.
Right.
But to begin with, he wasn't getting enough oxygenated blood, and different things were going on, that he wasn't growing as quickly as he should have been.
Okay.
So it was kind of every month, I think it was every month, we would go back to the hospital and they'd be like, right, if he hasn't put on this much next month, we're going to have to do surgery and close it. Well, every month we'd go, and I'd be frantic that he had to put on the right amount of weight. And I didn't breastfeed him for very long, because I needed to know that he was getting all of the milk that he could get. And I weaned him early, everything I could do to make sure that he reached every milestone that the hospital set. And every time he was just on it. So then the doctors would have a chat, and they'd be like, should we do it? Shouldn't we do it? Oh, I don't know whether he needs surgery. and they'd be like, we'll wait and see. So they give it another month and another milestone, and by the time we got to 10 months, and again at the 9-month point, everything was still in question. It was still a case of, does he need surgery or does he not? At 10 months, they did his little scan that they did, and they couldn't find the hole in his heart, which is perfectly normal because it's supposed to close as they get bigger. But I am convinced it's because of his Reiki, because he had it every single day. But whether it helped or it didn't help, it helped me. It helped me to feel like I was doing something,
right.
And I could do something. And it was, it was quite a relaxing thing. He was a very chilled baby as well. He was so relaxed as a kid. So maybe that had an effect as well.
I'm sure it would help, just even on your little, like, bonding with him, just sort of being with him while he was sleeping, and
very much. And I think it was, for me, it felt like I had, as I said to you before, when I used to have anxiety and depression and things, when I was younger, I had a lot of control issues. You want to control everything, don't you? Because you feel like your life isn't in control sometimes when you're struggling with depression and anxiety. And that was one thing that I felt that I could take control of and I could do for him. And then so it grew from that point. After his heart had closed, I didn't want to go back to my old job, so then I retrained and I did reflexology, which was a bit more of a kind of practical and less spiritual form of competency. And then it's just kind of grown from that. So I do tarot card readings, and I've done crystal healing as well. I'm very into the kind of alternative stuff and the freaky stuff, but it's all fine, so good.
I don't think you should call it freaky. I think I would use the word more gentle. It's just, a bit more gentle.
I think, exactly. It is just an alternative and complementary. I would never say to somebody not to seek medical help. I mean, God, I don't know where we would be if Matthew hadn't had the care that he had, or Al didn't have the care that he had for both of his. I'd never consider anything other than proper medical care. But for certain issues, it can help. It can run alongside and really help. I think it would be a huge treatment avenue for people with PTSD. And coming, like we said earlier, about coming back from war zones, I think that kind of gentle, non-invasive approach, where they don't really have to do a lot, but it can really help just reset their energy and get them into a different space. So I think that really could be explored for that, but whether it ever would be, I've no idea. And it's definitely been something that's offered me a comfort and a way of helping with all of the medical scenarios that we've kind of gone through.
Sure. Oh. No, I think you're right. I think it could really help. If people are open-minded about it and then they allow themselves to receive it, I definitely think it could help. I'll share the links to your pages though at the end of the video. I'll put links to so that people can find out more, because I'm sure you are a military wife, or former military wife, with these experiences. That they've helped your husband and your baby, and not baby anymore, but so why should they not help another guy or girl that's in the military? So I'll definitely share the links, because I'm sure there's going to be people that have maybe gone down the medical route or whatever and aren't getting the help that they need, then you might be able to help them. So that would be awesome. But
as well, we said with the therapies, I think it can also, like we were saying earlier, help with positive mental health, and with kind of people that are struggling with stress levels. The stress levels that Reiki can do with stress and reflexology, just that kind of moment and treatment that gives you that calm, can really help reset your brain waves and sort of the chemical release in your brain as well, and kind of release the endorphins, which do make you feel good. You know, there is some science behind it as well, that it can really help with stress related conditions and positive mental health.
Cool. Cool. Well, Becky, thank you so much for joining us today and telling your stories.
Let me waffle on. Yes, yeah. Stories.
I love it. I love it. I think that's what this project is all about. Real people telling real stories and their experiences. So, no, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Thank you.
Right. You're welcome. It's taken so long, but thank you for having me.
Don't worry, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. If you like this video, please do hit the like and subscribe button, and you'll get notifications when new videos are uploaded. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. If you search at Be Glad Movement, you'll be able to find us. And please do get in touch if you've got a story that you'd like to share. It doesn't matter if it's something similar to somebody else's story, because I really do believe your story and your voice has the ability to help someone in their time of need. So please do get in touch if you've got a story. I'd love to hear from you. And we'll look forward to seeing you in another episode. Many thanks.